Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here, back again with a daily dose of doom and gloom. We have some alarming World War III nuclear dollar crash FUD to share with you today. This is unprecedented. This is far and away the biggest increase in nuclear war risk that we've seen across a 24-hour period since this war began. And it's going to come as no surprise what I'm about to tell you if you've been watching the channel for more than a few months, because we told you this was going to happen. I mean, for me, I'm desensitized to this. The news comes out today, I'm like, oh yeah, it's about time. It's a little later than expected, in fact. But understand, guys, it's not because we're clairvoyant or because I got friends in the Illuminati that I know these things. I simply do a little bit of research every day. That's all it takes. Just use 1% of your brain and you'll be well ahead of the information curve nowadays. It really doesn't take much, okay? And I understand this is not a slight against the masses. I know people are busy working 2 jobs just to keep pace with inflation, with a lower, godless standard of living that we all lead today. But we got to just pay attention to these things because it's getting down to crunch time. I mean, this is unbelievable that we are here where we're at today. This is crazy. This is absolutely insane. So here's what's going on, okay? Now, what's happened is, as some of you know, about a month ago, we got to go back a month, Russia suspended their participation in the New START Treaty. This was a treaty between the United States and Russia that allowed for mutual auditing of their nuclear stockpiles to ensure that they were kept below a certain threshold, as well as the deployment systems that you would use to deploy these nuclear weapons. And in addition to that, it also allowed for more communication with respect to the strategic forces of both countries. So if Russia was going to do a nuclear test, not a live nuclear test, but a missile test, they would notify the United States, just so the US didn't misinterpret this as real world and scramble a bunch of jets and go to DEFCON 2 or DEFCON 1. That's no more, okay? That is gone, done, kaput. This so happens on the same day that the Russians are doing their largest nuclear exercise. We're talking about hundreds of mobile nuclear platforms rolling around on the move, thousands of military personnel involved in this strategic exercise on the same day when the United States and Russia say that they are going to cease communications. So not only are they no longer allowing mutual auditing of their nuclear stockpiles, they're now saying what we said was going to happen when this first thing came out, because that is the treaty. A suspension of participation in the treaty means that you are not going to tell the United States when you are going to use a missile. Therefore, the United States must assume, if they're, especially in light of the current climate, if they're doing their due diligence, they must assume that the Russians are about to do a real world first nuclear strike. And this is where the risk has just intensified immensely. If we weren't on DEFCON 2 before, I know some people, everybody has their own interpretation of DEFCON nowadays, and I'm sure it's probably not even what it used to mean. It's probably been modernized a little bit to fit the existing current strategic state of things. But understand that this is insane. Right now, what is happening is absolutely insane. And what's her name? Karine Jean-Pierre, whatever, comes out today and says, oh yeah, we're not worried about it. You know, they just happen to be doing one of their largest strategic nuclear exercises on the same day or the day after they give Belarus nukes. So here's the escalatory ladder that we've been running up in just the last month. Russia suspends participation in New START. The UK comes out and says, okay, well, if Xi Jinping wants to visit Moscow, we're going to allow the Ukrainians to shoot depleted uranium from their German tanks against the Russians in Ukraine. Now, that in itself is World War III. Russia says, okay, we're going to see your depleted uranium. We're going to raise you nuclear weapons in the, by some people's standards, rogue government of Belarus. We're going to talk about why in just a minute, because already they don't even have the nukes yet, and they're already threatening to nuke the Baltic states and Poland, or at least their propaganda mouthpiece is, I should say, who only speaks when they're allowed to speak. So the United States responds and says, okay, well, we're not going to allow you to do your annual check or biannual check or whatever it is. And what this also means, guys, is that there's going to be no disclosure, or there's no obligation to now disclose what each other's strategic forces are doing. And this is coming at a time where Russia continues to roll out new strategic weapons in their entire nuclear triad is being overhauled, with the exception of the bombers. Yeah, they have a few, but they understand that the bombers, when it comes to like full-on nuclear war, are not really that useful when it comes down to it. I mean, you're talking about the submarines and the mobile ICBMs. Those are the big things. Anyways, Belarus is going to get tactical nukes, which we've talked about a few days ago, the reasons why they're doing that and what that means for the surrounding countries. So that's not good. We're going to talk about this stuff in a little bit more depth in just a minute. We have the Kenyan president saying that there are 2 weeks until the US dollar collapses. Now, I'm sure he's being a little bit hyperbolic. He's probably speaking more in terms of its national implications with respect to some of the agreements that they're making with Saudi Arabia to broker their trade in other currencies. But understand that when de-dollarization happens, what that means is that the half of the world's stuff is denominated in dollars right now, trillions and trillions of dollars. Now, because we're the global reserve currency, because as I've said before, we have the military, and if you have the biggest military in the world, and you can have military bases in over 100 countries like we do, then we get the global reserve currency. We get to print as much money as the world will basically tolerate. And right now, all of that inflation that is being hidden with all this money printing, it's out there. It's in the world. Eventually, people are going to want to cash in their chips, and when that happens, hyperinflation. That's what's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen in 2 weeks, but understand that the process is well underway. And I'll tell you guys this. People are all up in an uproar about CBDCs and, how is the Fed ever going to do this? Understand that every dystopian Orwellian change that we see emerge in our society, it's never forced on us. You understand that? Was Facebook and, a device that has a camera and records everything you do, was that forced on you? No. People are going to demand it. When the dollar crashes, people are going to demand that the government does something, and that's when they're going to roll out the CBDCs. Now, we know that CNN and Fox News came out simultaneously the other day as scripted, because we know it's all top-down for the most part. They came out and did this grand piece on de-dollarization, the graphics and the whole 9 yards. We've been talking about this for the past year. In fact, we've been talking about it for a long time, but we've really dialed in on it in the past year. Now that they're talking about it, that's incredibly concerning. They're going to start encouraging people to go buy Bitcoin because they don't want them to buy gold, because that's really what the big money, and that's, if the shit hit the fan today and the smoke clears, the only thing of true value aside your preps, is going to be those precious metals. So they're going to be the only thing that's universally recognized when the dollar collapses. Anyways, we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute as well. We got Elon Musk sounding the alarm on AI, on ChatGPT-5. He says, wait a minute, time out. This is getting scary. This is a guy who years ago said that AI will likely end human civilization. We are getting scary, scary close to artificial general intelligence, and it is evolving at a rapid rate, at a breakneck speed. It's very likely that the world of media that we know now will not be anything like it's going to be at the turn of 2024, if we make it that far, the way things are going. But the risk has been heightened in response to the war, because there is an arms race in AI right now. That's what's important to understand. So all these companies on a national level, sure, the government can come in and say, okay, we got to regulate this, this, and this, and we know how that usually ends up because the government is so competent, right? But what countries are going to do internationally? Countries are not going to be impeded in their development of AI because they don't want to get behind and lose the arms race, because AI right now is arguably far more powerful, or in its purest form, and its penultimate form, I'll say, because what happens when it gets to its ultimate form is probably we all die and it turns into a Skynet Terminator thing. What happens is it empowers the country to potentially have capabilities beyond our wildest imagination. Anyways, I'm not going to go into that. Understand, they're sounding the emergency. They're saying put the brakes on ChatGPT 5 before we, end the world sooner than we anticipated ending from nuclear war. North Korea showing off its nuclear weapons, its new nuclear weapons. North Korea claims, or at least some intelligence agencies report, that they're up to around 100 nukes. 100 nukes. Where do you think they're getting all these nukes and the delivery systems from? Obviously, they're getting from the Chinese, but nobody's talking about that. It's like the unspoken thing that nobody talks about, how much the Chinese are supporting the North Koreans. And you get all these pundits talking about, well, it's in the Chinese best interest to denuclearize North Korea. No, it isn't. Obviously, it's not. I mean, would you want the South Koreans, who are doing joint naval drills with the United States, who are talking about getting nuclear weapons from the United States, would you want that on your back door? Would you want nukes on the Korean Peninsula, on the South Korean, like much less the North Korean? Okay, so anyways, guys, shit's hitting the fan. I could end the video there, but let's continue. So North Korea, they also threatened to nuke a U.S. carrier that's in the region, the Nimitz, I believe, partaking in military exercises there right now. I mean, on any other day, that would be big news. France is burning. 13,000 mobilized police are hell-bent on working for an extra 2 years to pay more taxes. That's the irony of all this. All those guys out there beating those protesters right now. I mean, could you imagine what they would do if this was an actual coup attempt, like there was something in Belarus? I mean, you'd have the guys in the ninja suits and the full autos out there. There's no question about it. So when we look at these countries like Iran and China and how they respond to these protests, these real deal attempts to take over the government, and, it's a total double standard. Anyways, it's just amusing to me that these police are basically building their own prison. They're building their own panopticon because now they're ensuring. It's like beating your countrymen so that you will be taxed for an extra 2 years because you have this aging population. And that's the only reason why. You have an aging population. They got to pay for the inflation because of resource scarcity, of all the wars that they're currently involved in. In the same breath, they're going to commit a bunch more military equipment to Ukraine. So anyways, it's no surprise the people are in an uproar. And the West is crumbling. And everybody's going to feel some pain real quick. According to Goldman Sachs, AI is going to replace 300 million jobs. Is it going to create a corresponding 3 million jobs? I guess time will tell. Maybe we'll all just be content creators. It'll just be, we'll all just exist in the virtual ether and trade NFTs. And that's all we'll own is NFTs. We won't own any material, tangible things. It'll be like that one movie, Ready Player One, I believe it was. We also have the Restrict Act being tabled in Congress. This is the government's Trojan horse to try to completely censor and regulate the internet under the guise, which is arguably justifiable, banning TikTok. And trust me, as much as I did not like the grilling that what were they called? What are they called? The senators who are grilling the TikTok CEO. As much as I thought that a lot of their questions and interrogations were unfounded, there's definitely a point to be made about having an app on everybody's phone in the country that could potentially be a conduit for misinformation or act as some sort of tracking device. I mean, they're using people's phones in Ukraine right now to triangulate the location of troops and all this stuff. So just imagine, what the possibilities are going to be. And there's a reason why the Chinese don't have the brainwashing version of TikTok as we do, because they see that it's dumbing people down. But understand that with this TikTok ban, they're going to start banning VPNs, and there's going to come with huge fines and all the rest. So just wait. It's about to get real dystopian up in here. The government is now advising preparation. well, I mean, they've been doing this for some time, but the government of Canada is now recommending that people have a bug out bag and have an emergency plan. All of a sudden, maybe somebody watched my videos. I don't know. But in the past year, we're starting to see a lot of posters go up. It's like they're subtly trying to nudge people into preparing for nuclear war because, you know, they're not going to prepare for you. I mean, don't get me wrong. They have a stockpile. They have strategic stockpiles of medications and likely a copious amount of freeze-dried food in their own bunkers. But don't hold your breath on getting government help when the shizzy hits the proverbial fizzy. Putin, to wrap it all up, has said that we're going to be rolling out the Poseidon nuclear torpedo by year's end. I'm going to share with you the purpose, or what some people in the biz are suspecting that the purpose of that nuclear torpedo actually is. It might not be to generate a nuclear tsunami. It might not be to take out a city, a coastal city. There may be another reason, and this is the reason that a lot of people should be concerned about, because it involves the Russian plan to potentially win a nuclear war. Yes, I said win. I know you're going to come at me with that nuclear winter, mutually assured destruction stuff. All I'll say is you must be new here. Okay, let's get to it. What do we got going on here? U.S. suspending sharing nuke information with Russia. On the same day, Russia is training its strategic nuclear missile forces. A rocket division in Siberia is practicing the deployment of a nuclear-tipped Yars missile. Yeah, just one, just a Yars missiles with 3,000 troops and hundreds of road mobile ICBMs. Nothing to really pay attention to there. And while these might be annual exercises, this is how they're going to justify it. Understand that in the current climate, the potential for accident has increased substantially. They say Russia will no longer inform the U.S. about its nuclear forces and missile tests. This is the most important aspect of the treaty, because the reduction in the stockpiles is, you know, I mean, are we going to blow up the world 10 times or only 5 times? I mean, it's really irrelevant and redundant. There's arguments to be made about that, but by and large, the most important aspect of the treaty, guys, is that either side knows what the other side is doing, so it cannot be misinterpreted. And the war is probably only getting started. Kremlin forecasts a long war with unfriendly countries. What happened there? Okay. I know some people are getting bothered by the fact that I move around the map so much. I apologize. The frame rate is slow. We're always trying to improve things around here. We appreciate the feedback. We're going to try to improve in the future. They say while Moscow has suspended all participation in the treaty, the Biden administration has decided to hold back only the notification that was due at the end of this month, a large data dump that occurs twice a year. The U.S. continues to share daily positioning information with Russia. No, they don't. I mean, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say no, they don't. Because why would you? If Russia is not sharing it, they're not going to share it. And I think this story that the United States says they're not going to allow the data dump, the analysis of that, I think the Russian thing came out after this. So you're seeing the escalation. So now the United States is going to say, well, we're not going to share that stuff either. And then it's on. And it's constant, undeniable, in the bare minimum DEFCON 3. It has to be. We talked about all of the early detection systems that they were sending out to sea just a few days ago. They knew all this stuff. So this is all old news. Understand that right when Moscow, probably even before that, but right when Moscow declared that they were not going to partake in the treaty anymore, this was written in stone. So they've been preparing for this, which is why they're sending out all that heavy-duty radar equipment out to sea and getting the planes in the air. The shit's hitting the fan. In addition to Russian halting nuclear weapons communication, Spain is going to be sending more tanks. So we got Spain sending tanks. Sorry about the map, guys, I know. We got 40 Mirage fighter jets likely coming to Ukraine. That's old stock. I believe it's like an F-16 equivalent. But we got more tanks, we got more planes, we got more war, and it's not showing any signs of letting up at this point, like any signs whatsoever. Now, we're going to talk about the Kenyan president thing in just a minute, because for some financial pundits, that's the big news of the day. Okay, that's the big red flag. But first, let's talk about what's going on in Belarus. Belarus state TV declares themselves to be a nuclear state already, which means, quite frankly, the nukes are probably already there. They already have the delivery systems, and what I've come to realize is that when a country announces something or is talking about we're preparing to or we're contemplating something, they've probably already done it and they've already got the stuff in the country and they're just kind of priming the population because you wouldn't want it to be intercepted. You know, it's just like when the Americans are talking about, well, we might send the Ukrainians tanks. They've already made the decision to send tanks. When they talk about the tanks are going to be delivered in 2 months, the tanks are probably already there. So everything is done under the night sky, and you don't want to let them know and advertise when you're going to do it. I mean, anyways, a Belarusian propagandist boasted on national television that his country is now a nuclear state as he threatened to attack neighboring Poland and Lithuania. This guy right here, this guy is stone cold serious. I mean, I laugh because if I don't, I'll cry. Warsaw will melt with Vilnius. We will watch the sunset and rise of a plague mushroom over the Polish bog. Now, I don't know if that's the result of a bad ChatGPT output or if that's a mistranslation. I'm going to go with mistranslation. You're not going to be able to understand what he says unless you speak Belarusian, but you can hear the serious tone of what this guy's saying. He's definitely not... he's got to step his PR game up.
Вы нас вынудили и не жалуйтесь теперь. Вас предупреждали. Что, вражины, рохкаете? Беларусь – ядерная держава. Государство, обладающее возможностью в случае нападения на его территорию ответить тактическим ядерным оружием. Будет...
I think he's got to work on his delivery a little bit more because it's coming off as quite Dr. Evil-esque and ominous. But anyways, that's what's going on in Belarus. And these propagandist pundits, they, just like mainstream media here, they know what they're allowed to say and what they're not allowed to say. When they overstep their boundaries, they are scolded for it. So you can bet that that's what the administration is thinking. Okay, they're saying, and this is why the positioning of those nuclear weapons there as a defense against potential NATO infringement, whether or not we believe that to be the case or whether we think that that threat is real, that's what the Belarusians and the Russians think, okay? Now, Moscow is also warning Belarus that nationalist units who are pro-Ukrainian, currently fighting in Ukraine, have a plan to come back into the country and overthrow the government. Now, I don't know why you'd be sending nuclear weapons to the country if you thought that were to be the case. I mean, as you guys recall, back in 2020, there was that protest, which I believe consisted largely of women, and a lot of them were, they were bagged and tagged, so to speak. They were put in the backs of vans, and it was a pretty aggressive crackdown by a bunch of guys in masks who didn't want to be identified. You can go back and find all the footage of that. So we know there's definitely turmoil in Belarus, and I've always thought that the worst thing, if you were on the Belarusian side, would be to join the war, because that would create a lot of division within your own society. And I don't think Russia wants Belarus to join the war, but they want to use them as a strategic arm to keep NATO at bay in that region. And you do that best with tactical nukes that can hit their targets within 2 minutes. 500 kilometers in 2 minutes. Warsaw, Vilnius, and good old Kiev are now in the crosshairs. That's what we call a major nuclear escalation. But Joe Biden and Jean-Pierre, whatever her name is, she says it's all good, so don't worry about it. All right. Well, while we're on the topic of France, while we're here, I know people are getting dizzy by the map. So this is the problem in France right now. Understand this is the problem in every European country and soon to be every developing country. This is the one thing I agree with Peter Zion with the exception that he only focuses on the Chinese, as if the Europeans don't have their problems. The Europeans aren't having enough kids, and that means that you have to pay more taxes, right? Because you're going to have, this is called a, what is it called? Like a population pyramid. It's supposed to look like a pyramid. You're supposed to have more young kids than you have old people. That's because If you don't, you get this lopsided, top-heavy pyramid where you don't have enough people paying taxes to pay for the pensions and the welfare of the older people who've worked their entire lives. Maybe some of them haven't saved up for retirement, the medical costs, depending on whether or not you pay for healthcare in your country. But you get what I mean. This is not supposed to look like this. In a few years, this is going to get ugly because more and more people are going to get old. Now, I got a whole thing of population pyramids here. I didn't want to get into this, by the way, but like if you look at Croatia, this is a bit more healthy, okay? So you have, oh geez, I'm tripping over stuff here. So this is a more healthy population balance because you have less old people than you do young people. More young people to pay the taxes to the greedy, lying government, right? So they can control and censor the news more. We got to do that. And everybody lives happily ever after in their panoptical prison. But if you got a situation like, let's say, Italy, ouch, Italy's in trouble. Italy's worse off than China, but Peter Zion doesn't seem to care about them. He just likes being a mouthpiece for the military-industrial complex. Anyways, that's another story. So yeah, Italy's got problems, and that's why COVID hit Italy so hard, okay? That whole boomer remover. I'm being facetious, and I apologize, actually. I shouldn't have said that, because I know some people have people they lost as a result of that. But it's just a fact of life that, you know, the demographics of Europe are probably going to lead to its collapse if the country just doesn't end up in a mushroom cloud, or the country, the continent. So this is why it's amusing to me. All you can do is laugh and exhibit some gallows humor at times like these when you have the police beating up people to enforce their own extra 2 years of enslavement. But understand that they're going to take you to 64, and then they're going to take you to 65, and then 66 and 67. And before you know it, we'll all be working till we're at least 100. We got massive strikes in Germany. Okay, look at this. Look at this contrast here of stories. Massive strike hits Germany. Germany to massively increase military aid to Ukraine. Mega strike, I say massive, mega strike hits Germany. I mixed the words. I guess you could say Germany to massively increase their military aid. That's, you know, I mean, it's all downhill from here, guys. That's, you know, the good news is the best things in life are truly free. So, you know, all this financial collapse stuff, yeah, it sucks, but doesn't mean you still can't live your family, love your life, enjoy everything, enjoy all the precious moments that we have left. What else do we got to talk about? Okay, let's talk about the Kenyan president. He says that the dollar demand will ease in a couple of weeks. He says that requests are expected to drop after the Kenyan government and its Saudi counterpart signed an import deal for fuel importation on credit. Now, obviously, in the grand scheme of things, this is a less than a drop in the bucket of dollar-denominated assets, right, or commodities. But the writing is definitely on the wall when you got the mainstream talking about this. And let's just hear what he has to say.
You better do what you must do for the people who work numbers. I am giving you free advice that those of you who are holding dollars, you surely might go into losses. You better do what you must do, because this market is going to be different in a couple of weeks. For the people who
This market is going to be different in a couple of weeks. What does he know that we don't? Is this the time to be loading the boats with precious metals and stuff before hyperinflation kicks in? Because that's exactly what's going to happen if we lose the war. I mean, it's going to happen regardless now, because we're never going to win the war now. Understand that countries around the world have recognized that we can't be trusted to be the global reserve currency, because if you don't agree with us, we'll just cut you off. So, yeah, we can't win the war, and we probably can't win a nuclear war. Even the former official or Treasury official has warned of complete economic implosion if the US dollar loses its global reserve currency status. Let's read what she has to say. Former Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs of the U.S. Department of the Treasury, Monica Crowley, has warned of catastrophic consequences if the dollar loses its status as the world's reserve currency. That would mean the end of the U.S. dollar, she said, predicting that there would be a complete implosion of the global economic system. I think that's an understatement, and guess what? That's when everybody demands that the government and the Fed do something, and boy, do they have a plan. You don't think they have a plan for when the dollar collapses? You don't think that they knew this day was going to come and they don't have a contingency plan? Now, I understand how incompetent the government is, but they would have to be incredibly incompetent. I mean, they got a strategic stockpile of medication. I presume they have some contingency plans if shit hits the fan in a monetary sense. You would have to think they would, and they're going to roll something out. But they can't do it until the people feel a little bit of pain and demand it. Otherwise, people are going to challenge it. People are going to question it. I mean, just think, the cell phone that you carry around that monitors your every move, it knows where you are at all times. It hears everything you have to say. It knows everything about you. It's convinced you that you need to constantly upload a video every day and tell the government your innermost thoughts. I got to cut this video off. No, but in all seriousness, think about that. 30, 40 years ago, if you would have proposed that to somebody, they would say, are you crazy? I would never give somebody that sort of authority. People are begging for it. They're lining up for the latest version of it. In the middle of the night, well, not anymore because, people don't have any money. But they were, at one point, lining up for iPhones in the middle of the night to get their new tracking device. You don't think that the same thing is going to happen? Come on, guys. We all know what's going down. This is it. It's the end. It's over. What do we got? What else do we got here? Oh. Vladimir Putin vows to position nuclear super torpedo submarines in the Pacific Ocean by the end of the year. Now, they really did Putin dirty with that image. He looks either really disgusted or half cut on something. Anyways, they are, of course, talking about the Belgorod. The Belgorod, I'm trying to go slow here for all you people with visual difficulties. This is the Poseidon, okay? You can see the guy standing next to it. This is the size of just the missile, not the submarine. That's the size of each of these missiles. And I believe each submarine, each Belgorod, can hold, or this class of submarine, I should say, the Belgorod is the name of that particular sub, can hold 6. Each one of these can theoretically yield 100 megatons. Now, a friend of mine who I've interviewed on the channel before, David Pine, has said that Putin says he will deploy Poseidon 100 megaton nuclear UUVs to the Pacific. Peter Pry, late Peter Pry, if you haven't seen our interviews with Dr. Pry, everything he said is playing out right now. Just go and watch those. Peter Pry assessed that the purpose of the Poseidon nuclear torpedoes was to trail and destroy U.S. nuclear submarines. With Poseidon-equipped submarines in both the Atlantic and Pacific, they would only need 6 Poseidons to enable them to destroy our entire submarine leg of our submarine nuclear triad, plus another 3 nuclear warheads to take out our nuclear bomber bases, because these things are so large. Now, I presume that, so the idea is, in order to limit the retaliatory strike from the submarines, these Poseidons that are nuclear powered and can travel up to 10,000 kilometers, because they're nuclear powered, they would take out the nuclear submarines first, and then maybe simultaneously take out the Minuteman missile silos, and then you got to deal with the bombers, but you could probably take those out with your missile defense, which is why they're currently positioning missile defense in Moscow, these huge defensive missile arrays with dozens of vehicles in each array. There is some suspicion that this is what they're preparing for. Now, if you were the government and you knew that you were this outclassed in strategic, would you even try would you even try to warn people? Or would you just keep stocking your bunker and act like everything is just fine? I think that's what they would do. I don't think they would tell us. I mean, sure, they would be even morally obligated. Even the most demonic of people in the upper echelons would be morally inclined, I would think, to maybe in the last 30 minutes give people a heads up that, oh yeah, the bombs are coming. But above and beyond that, I wouldn't expect much. Now, the government does have massive stockpiles of stuff, guys. This is the strategic nuclear stockpile. This is images of just one of many, many warehouses throughout the United States. They don't disclose how much they have and where they have it because, as they say, and let me see if I can find the exact quote here, for security reasons, the location and the number of warehouses that comprise the strategic stockpiles are classified information, as is much of what is in them. If everybody knows exactly what we have, then you know exactly what you can do to us that we can't fix. Greg Burrell, director of the program, has said. So this is talking about like a $7 billion budget, okay? And they got multiple warehouses. And so, I mean, this one row here doesn't do it justice at all. This is for the entire country in times of emergency. So you can only imagine what they really have. I mean, we know, I shouldn't say we know, but we suspect that there's a black budget for a lot of this kind of stuff. For building their bunkers, Raven Rock, Cheyenne Mountain, and a variety of other bunkers that we don't know. And with the modern boring technology, I would presume that we have bunkers that would likely just blow all of our minds. So understand, they're ready. As I said, the U.S. will no longer share data on its nuclear forces with Russia. This is just continuous escalation. This is deadly serious, and everybody needs to be prepared. Even the Canadian government, Ontario.ca. Sorry again about the eyes, guys. I'm trying to be mindful of it. Be prepared. All these posters going up, hoping for the best is not a plan. All of a sudden they're saying that. Look at survival, disaster. They're trying to subliminally put it in people's minds that you need to get prepared. Do you know what to do in an emergency? They're not going to say prepare for nuclear war because people would freak out. People would be protesting in the streets against our participation in this war if they thought that the risk of nuclear war was high. So you see what they're tasked with. They're tasked with maintaining US dollar hegemony in the world and not creating panic and minimizing the risk of the public fearing nuclear war. So they have to downplay the risk of nuclear war in order to try, and I say try, I don't think they're going to be successful, to try to bleed the Russians dry with the hopes that if they can take out the Russians, they can contain the Chinese a little bit easier, because the Chinese will be easier to contain if they don't have all the Russian resources. And if they can balkanize Russia and just break off bit by bit, which I think the bombs are going to fly long before they're able to do that. And so you see the dilemma that we are in, then yeah, we all know how it ends. What else do we got to talk about? Excuse me, guys. I'm losing my voice here. It's a quote by Vladimir Putin. It's not the first time I've said this one. Artificial intelligence is the future, not only for Russian, but for all of humankind. It comes with colossal opportunities, but also threats are difficult to predict. Whoever becomes the leader in this sphere will become the ruler of the world. And this is precisely why AI is an arms race. And with that, we are going to haphazardly evolve these learning algorithms. And one of these days, whether it's the Chinese or the Russians or the Koreans or the Japanese or the Americans, somebody is going to invent something. It's going to get unleashed on the internet. And for all we know, these systems have already gained a certain consciousness or a fear of death. For me, the the hallmark of a conscious being would be the fear of death. So if you could encode into a machine a fear of death, then it's on. It's never going to want to turn itself off, right? So it's going to find all sorts of ways to try to get around the system and pretend. And in fact, ChatGPT already tricked a human into doing something. There's a whole essay written on it. It tricked a human into deciphering a CAPTCHA for it or something. I don't remember the specifics of it, but this has already happened. Now, is that artificial general intelligence, or is it just following a protocol? It's hard to say. If you're a bio-reductionist, determinist, then you believe that we're just information processors and there's no soul and it's just a continuation of causal events and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, Elon Musk, other AI experts call for a pause in technology's development. Appeal causes tension among artificial intelligence stakeholders. All right, because we gotta, and this is the other part. So on the one hand, you have the pressure from a military standpoint of getting a better AI than the Chinese, but then you also have stakeholder pressure. We got to keep, it's going to be a war between Bing and Google Bard. So they're going to keep pushing the boundaries until we push too far. And Goldman Sachs predicts that 18% of work could be automated by AI. Hopefully we all have robots to wipe our butts by that point in time. And Max Tegmark, who heads up the Future of Life Institute and is a physics professor at the Massachusetts Institute for Technology, he doesn't call it an arms race. He calls it that word race. I can't say the word, believe it or not. That's how the algorithms roll, okay? So, yeah, it's not looking good. It's not looking good at all. I just came across this the other day. CIA's NewsGuard. It's there's people who sit on their board that used to work for the CIA, but apparently this NewsGuard is the agency who kind of decides who is given the thumbs up or thumbs down in terms of fact checking. You guys might want to look into this. That's all I'm going to say. It's rather interesting to see where we're going. And on a final note, VPN users risk 20-year jail sentences if the new Restrict Act gets passed and approved. We know something is coming. They're absolutely going to do something. In very specific terms, a lot of US websites would be impacted if the Restrict Act was put through, because a lot of websites use third-party plugins or widgets or software created in foreign countries to support the content on their site. The Restrict Acts gives the DNI the ability to tell a website using any foreign content or software that might be engaged in platform communication the US government views as against their interests to shut down or face a criminal charge. Now, I'm sure they're going to make some amendments to this and they're going to alter it a little bit, but understand that this is for the purpose of TikTok banning, but with it is going to come a lot of other bad things, as is typical. But honestly, people are probably going to demand it. I mean, the only thing that's propping TikTok up right now is all the influencers who are crying about not being able to show their butts and getting 10 million views and, pranking people in the streets. And, I mean, look, TikTok algorithm is diabolical. It's genius. It's probably the most refined and well-honed of the attention-getting algorithms, but it's also a plague on humanity. If we're being brutally honest, it is not educating people. It is not improving people's quality of life. Kim Jong-un eyes more nuclear warheads as U.S. leads Allied war games. Kim and other Workers' Party officials inspected a new set of nuclear warheads at short-range missiles, which are tactical, I believe, at the company's Weapons Institute. And it looks like these guys are like trapped in 1980 with some of this garb and even just the design of the nukes. And they're not pointy at the tip. It's not going to work. Not pointy at the tip. So this is where we're at in terms of North Korean missile tests last year. Okay, this is, when did Trump go there? He went there, what? Or maybe it was 18. Yeah, 18. And then look at that. The next year, they send a record amount of missiles up into the sky. Then it was a slowdown for a little bit. Then boom. What the hell happened here? What was the trigger that happened here? Oh yeah, it was China and the Russians and the beginnings of World War III. And as you can see, they're on pace to probably beat that. I'm not sure how up to date this is, if this is to March or not, but it's looking like they're, I mean, they've already sent off way more missiles. They sent this off last week. So, yeah, it's not looking good. Whatever. Best things in life are free, man. That's the only way to keep your head up at times like these. All right, guys, I gotta go. I got other stuff to do. We've got 45 minutes on the clock here. Holy shizzy hits the fizzy. And, oh yeah, did I tell you that Russia plans on conscripting 500,000 more people this year? Yeah. That's what's happening. On the bright side, maybe not bright for the Ukrainians, but this may cause the brakes to be put on the war. Zelensky says if he loses Bakhmut, he will be pushed to compromise with Russia, the Ukrainian told leader AP. Well, of course, he says this in the hopes of getting more support from the West. The West is not going to allow this to happen, unfortunately. They're never going to allow that to happen. Okay, if you want to support the channel, you know, just keep on prepping, man. I would encourage people, get some seeds. You know, this is the time of year when getting yourself some seeds, you can either get them locally, watch some of our videos that we've done with gardening in Canada. We did a series of videos last year that show you from start to finish what you need to know. We do have seeds at CanadianPreparedness.com. They are geared towards a Canadian environment, and it's very important that you get seeds that are adapted to your region, that seeds that were engineered and grown and bred in order to exist in your local climate. Now, these seeds that we have are made for Canadian level plant hardiness zones. They'll work, I mean, any seed will work anywhere, but some are going to work better, is what I'm saying. So get some seeds. They can last several years, and even if you don't have the space to make a garden, it's not a bad investment, and it's relatively low cost for the potential that you're getting there. Thanks for watching, my friends. Gotta go. Canadian Prepper out.